actually go outside in these things?
For every iconic, legendary, and complex movie costume, you can almost guarantee that inside is an actor wondering if they're getting paid enough to do this. Sure, we all think actors get to live the easy life most of the time, but there is sometimes a struggle when it comes to certain costumes. Which of your favorite movie costumes proved to be impossible to take off? And which actor do you think handled it the best? Well, let's talk about some of our favorite infamous costume examples right now. Do you think Paul Bettany ever regrets agreeing to play Vision? I mean, think about it. For the longest time, Bettany was earning a solid paycheck for just voicing Jarvis, which required basically no extraneous work whatsoever. He'd just show up, say his lines, and go home, where presumably a big pile of money was waiting for him. But then someone, somewhere, had the bright idea that Paul Bettany should play Vision. Can you imagine how that conversation went? Okay, Vision is part Ultron and part Jarvis, and hey, that Paul Bettany guy's an actor, let's just use him. So he went from simple VO work to perhaps the most complex costume in the MCU. Every day on set, Bettany had to be loaded up with red makeup and a bunch of prosthetics to give him a robotic quality. And the whole process took a ton of time. You can kind of imagine he was somewhat happy to sit out Endgame so he could have a bit of a makeup break. Though, is it all misdirect? This video clip makes it seem like Paul Bettany is ripping off his skin to reveal the red Vision face underneath, doesn't it? Have we been fooled this entire time? Is Paul Bettany actually a robot? Jury's still out on that one. Do you think Rebecca Romijn and Jennifer Lawrence ever called one another up to talk about the makeup and costume process they had to endure for the role of Mystique? It's clearly one of the most complicated X-Men costumes in any of the movies. I mean, all Hugh Jackman really had to do was grow sideburns to be in costume. The Mystiques had to sit and endure hours of makeup every day to get the look just right. And once the blue was on, it was hard to come off. Any wrong move could undo the massive amount of work done to get everything just right. Now the question is, who had it the worst? The always candid Jennifer Lawrence opened up about how when she was in the Mystique costume, she wasn't allowed to sit down or else that would ruin everything, which meant that when nature called, she was brought a funnel so that she could relieve herself standing up. Hey, who says artists don't suffer for their work, right? Though as the movies went on, it was clear the makeup for Mystique got a little easier and less complex, but still, years of playing that role had to get tiresome after a while. The saddest thing about X-Men Apocalypse isn't the fact that the movie was a huge letdown, but it's the poor plight of Oscar Isaac. He's gone on record saying he only took the part of the titular big bad mutant because he wanted to act alongside James McAvoy, Jennifer Lawrence, and Michael Fassbender. But then his costume totally ruined the whole experience. Most of the time, he had to be wheeled around in a special chair so not to disrupt the heavy prosthetics and makeup that he had to sit through every day. And then, during shooting, the costume weighed an excessive 40 extra pounds and was so hot that they had to build in a cooling mechanism to keep Isaac from overheating. But taking off the costume sounds even more grueling than putting it on. It's been reported that to remove all the makeup and the gear Isaac was wearing, he had to scrape his skin every day after shooting in order to get it all off, only to do it all again the following day. Man, I would understand going through all of that for a really excellent movie, but can you imagine doing it for something like X-Men Apocalypse? I think one day when aliens conquer Earth and spend time looking over the historical records, they'll find Jim Carrey's performance as the Grinch is an all-time great. Okay, maybe that's a bit extreme, but still, the Grinch is classic Jim Carrey in all his wacky glory. But maybe that wasn't really Carrey acting all mean all the time, because by the sounds of it, the torturous process to get in character every day could drive anyone to be a little grouchy. The process took around 8 hours every day to get the perfect Grinch look, which sounds just insane. Can you imagine sitting for 8 hours for makeup, working a few hours, then going through the tough process of scraping and peeling it all off, only to do it again the next day? Like, if I was Carrey in that situation, I think I would have done some method acting and just became the Grinch permanently during the shoot. So yeah, once the costume was on, it stayed on. Carrey has even said that the production hired a CIA operative to train Carrey in the art of withstanding torture so that he could get through the makeup process every day. That's hardcore. Do you ever just look at movie costumes and immediately think how uncomfortable they are? That's always my first thought when I watch Tim Story's Fantastic Four films and see Michael Chiklis as the Thing walking around. Every day, Chiklis would spend over 5 hours getting into costume so that he could clobber some stuff. but the actor underneath the suit was really having a hard time. Chiklis eventually had to talk to a psychologist specifically about the costume and how to learn to stick with it. He really wanted to quit. The suit was heavy and bulky, and Chiklis could never get it off without someone's help. Imagine that, you're put under intense makeup and prosthetics and then just got to hope the makeup people will be nice enough to remove it, because if not, then there's some trouble. While in the costume, Chiklis couldn't eat real food and just had to live off a diet of protein shakes throughout everything, but talking with the psychologist helped calm him down and allowed him to finish the movie. It seems like nobody had a good time in the Robocop suit. Obviously, Peter Weller first brought the character to life originally, and his discomfort with the Robocop suit almost led him to quit on the very first day. The suit was just too heavy, too bulky, and consisted of too many different parts for Weller to move normally. He was constantly sweating and has said he lost a ton of weight during the shoot due to dehydration. And while that's bad and all, I kinda feel worse for the next guy. After Weller didn't return for the third movie, he was recast with Robert Burke. But there was a problem. The production didn't want to make another Robocop suit when they already had the ones from the previous films. But the OG suit was made specifically for Weller, which means Burke had an even tougher time as the suit didn't even fit him. And would you want to wear a suit that another person basically sweated their body weight into? I don't think so. Besides just being a bad movie, there was a reason why fans weren't that excited about the recent Hellboy reboot. To many, Ron Perlman is Hellboy, and even though his movies didn't light the box office on fire, to see the franchise rebooted without giving Perlman's Hellboy franchise a proper conclusion stung a lot. And there were a lot of reasons why Hellboy 3 never happened. And one factor might have been Perlman's reluctance to go through the makeup process for Hellboy again. It took a long time to paint Perlman red every single day, and on top of that, he needed his prosthetic horns and his giant rock hand. Hey, nobody ever said playing a superhero was easy. Jake Garber was the makeup artist behind Hellboy, and he's explained that mostly everything that went into the costume were these foam prosthetic pieces that were glued on over a skull cap. That doesn't sound too pleasant. But some days were clearly easier than others. When Hellboy wore clothes, things were a little smoother, but when he needed to be shirtless, that took a lot more time and people to get the look just right. Tim Curry is an icon thanks to his roles as Pennywise, Dr. Frankenfurter, and even Wadsworth in Clue. But there's one Curry role that doesn't get nearly enough credit. It's his terrifying, nightmarish monster known as the Darkness in the fantasy film Legend. Just looking at him, you can't really tell it's Curry underneath all that red paint and makeup. His most distinguishing feature has to be his gigantic horns that are glued onto the side of his head. Wowza, those horns are massive! Careful there, Darkness, you might accidentally poke a few eyes out. And while the makeup was hard to get on and off every day, the horns actually had to have a complete redesign. After Curry first put them on, they were simply too heavy to carry around. I mean, that should have been obvious from the get-go, right? I know Tim Curry is basically America's sweetheart, but even he has his limits. Does anyone else have nightmares of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle costumes, or is that just me? Come on, they're creepy! And this shouldn't come as a big surprise to anyone, but the suits were a major chore to wear and operate. Each suit was about 50 pounds, and they made the actors inside the suits feel extremely claustrophobic. But there was nothing that could be done. Removing the head and the costume, even for breaks, was a major hassle because of the animatronics and technology powering the suits, so they mostly had to stay on and suffer. If someone absolutely had to take a break, it would take a whole half hour to get the suit just right again. And with 4 turtle suits to manage, the production was a nightmare. I think if that was me, I'd just accept my fate and embrace my life as a man in a turtle suit from now on and just never take it off. Spawn is one of those cult classic darker superhero films that doesn't get enough credit. We're getting a reboot soon-ish, but many still fondly remember the original version with Michael Jai White as Spawn. But you know who doesn't remember it fondly? Michael Jai White himself. He notoriously hated both the movie and the filming process, and hearing what he had to go through, that's kind of understandable. Most of the prosthetics had to be glued to his body, which took hours. And then on top of that, his eyes were constantly hurting thanks to the yellow contacts he had to wear. If that wasn't enough, the hardcore face mask that he had to keep on most of the time thanks to all the makeup really hurt his breathing. Yeah, not a good experience for the actor. The 90s were an odd time for superhero movies, and Spawn was certainly a strange cinematic experience. But your whole perspective of the movie changes once you know how much White hated being a part of it. Hey, next time an actor takes on a role in a comic book movie, there should be a clause in their contract how the actor has to be able to use the bathroom properly. I think that would have saved most of these actors a lot of discomfort, don't you?